Thanks, John. So yeah, we're going to talk about modeling Argo CD app promotion between environments with our new CRDs. If you're not familiar with CRDs, this is a Kubernetes native resource called custom resource definitions. And it's basically a way that you can add custom elements to Kubernetes and use them to manage things, use a controller. So Argo CD, if you're familiar with it, uses CRDs extensively. So that's how you define an application, is with an application CRD. So these are some new CRDs that we're introducing, which are really powerful. So first off, if you don't know me, my name is Dan Garfield. I'm the VP Open Source here at Octopus Deploy. I'm an Argo maintainer. I helped create Open GitOps, and you can find me on Twitter, X, Blue Sky at Today Was Awesome, and happy to chat with you there. If you're not familiar with the GitOps offering by Octopus Deploy, we have an Argo control plane with promotions, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of that element today. We have an enterprise support for Argo and technical account management. We have a hardened security distribution for Argo, and we have the #1 GitOps training certification. It says over 23,000 students. We actually just passed 24,000 students, so little addition there. So let's jump right into the content here. And first off, when you handle application promotion across environments, you might think of dev, staging, and production. This is pretty common. You might also think of places like regions, US West, US East. And so when I think of production, oftentimes it's not just a single cluster. It might actually be multiple clusters. So in this case, we've got as production, that's when I push to US East, US West, EU West, and maybe other places. And so as I think about what an environment is, this is a kind of key core concept that we're going to talk about. Production in the real world usually isn't just a cluster, right? It's usually a whole bunch of things. It's a whole bunch of resources, even outside of Kubernetes, that you think of. So within the Argo CD world, if you want to deploy an application to all these places, you would actually create 5 different Argo CD applications, one for each environment. And you might use an application set to do this if you're familiar with application sets, or you might do this just in Git, or you might do this in a number of different ways. But at the end of the day, Argo CD needs to have 5 different applications to tell it, here's the source of truth of what should be deployed, and here's the cluster that it should be deployed to. Now, these could be managed by a single Argo instance. They could be managed by each individual Argo instances. It's not necessarily important for today's discussion. But this is just how Argo applications work, right? So you need 5 of them in order to do this. You can't have an application that points to multiple destinations. It has to point to one. An application set can generate multiple applications, and they, of course, can point to wherever. But at the end of the day, you have to have an application. So a common way to do this for some people would be to use a shared Git source. So that would be a single source of truth in Git that has the manifests that are going to be deployed to all these places. And I've marked here that this is bad. Now, why is this bad? Well, if you think about it, all of these applications are pointed to the same Git source, meaning the same source of truth. And so they would actually have the same values file. For example, if this is a Helm chart. So to the left here, you can see I've got a little values file. And so that means if I push an update to that values file, all of these environments would then be updated. Now, this is a way that a lot of people have tried to do this. And the downside of this is there's no real way to stage changes in a kind of expected way. One of the ways that people have handled this is #2, doing manual syncing with external automation. So for example, they might disable auto sync in all of these environments, all these applications, and then use a CI process to go and update, to go and turn on syncing kind of manually for each environment, and then build logic around that. It's not a great model because it doesn't handle variation very well. What kind of variation are we talking about? Well, for example, we might have differences in these environments of things that should be handled. So we'll talk about that in a second, and it should make sense. So this is a better pattern. This would be each environment, each application actually gets its own source of truth. Now, this could be a monorepo. It could be pointing to the same Git repo, but a different folder. And you can see here, for example, that this one is actually showing a variation between these values files where dev has an environment variable that marks it as dev, and staging has one that marks it as staging, and the production ones have ones that mark it as production. So that's an example of showing variation, which we couldn't handle in that previous model where you had maybe a shared Git source. So this has a bunch of advantages. This is easy to stage and test because you make one Git change to dev. When you're ready, you make another Git change to staging. When you go to production, you make another Git change to production. This is flexible. It follows permission structures as well. So for example, I might have the permission to push directly to dev, but not to prod because I don't have access to that Git folder or that Git repo to do write access directly. It needs to go through a pull request. So this is nice because it kind of respects the Git structure. It also protects variation because you have different sources of truth between these different applications. And it also, one potential downside is you kind of have a large Git structure to manage, because if you could imagine if you had 75 environments, you now have 75 individual values files potentially that you would need to manage. So that does need automation if you're gonna do that. And so that's actually what we're gonna talk about today. To double click on these, this structure here, I do recommend reading. We have 2 blog posts that Coast has put together. One on how to model your GitOps environments and promote releases between them. And this specifically talks about folder structure and not using branches for environments, for example, which is an anti-pattern. And the second one is about doing the same thing, but using an application set that automatically generates everything, so you don't generate any, so you don't have to manually create any applications. You can just do everything completely declaratively in Git. So to tackle this problem of handling these promotions and following that kind of framework that we've just set, we have 3 concepts that we need to introduce, and these are CRDs. The first is products, the second is promotions, and the third is environments. So let's double click on each of those and make sure that they're super clear. So a product is the relationship between apps. So for example, here you can see there's a product called Trio, and it has 6 different apps associated with it. 1 in dev, 1 in QA, 1 in staging, and 3 in production. And you can see that this actually matches the pattern that we just talked about, right? All of these 5 apps here would be part of that same product, right? All of those apps that are there. And in this case, there's an additional environment. So there's 6. Now, the way that you define a product, that you define that these applications have a relationship with each other, is by using this annotation, codefresh.io/product, and you can give it a product name. In this case, it would be Trio. And now they will be recognized by our controllers as being part of a relationship. So when I try to push between 2 environments or 2 applications, it knows that it's actually these apps that are linked in a way, right? So I'm promoting from dev to QA to staging. It's going to update each of those apps in turn because they are part of this product. And we'll talk about how that works. The product CRD is also more extensive. So for example, here you can see the product CRD where we've outlined a promotion template. So this specifies 2 things. There's a version source. So this is what version will be displayed and associated with the update. So this could be the chart version, the app version. It could be an image tag. You can basically just specify a JSON path within a YAML file of what's going to be where to find it. Now I say it's a JSON. JSON and YAML are they're not the same format, but in the Kubernetes world, we can basically anything that we can grab out of a YAML file, we can also target with a JSON path. So those of you that are familiar with Kustomize or other tools like that will recognize that as a very familiar pattern. The other is this promotion down below, and this specifies which files and paths should be used for promotion. So for example, this one is saying, look at version.yaml and take the JSON path for version. It's a root path in that file, and promote that. So when I promote from one environment to another, it's actually going to use this to figure out which components should be updated in these other apps. And there's also a way to specify which components should not be updated. So this gives you the ability to essentially control what differences between apps within the same product should be tolerated and which ones should be upgraded. This is, for those of you that use Argo CD, this is very similar to ignore differences. We use ignore differences extensively in Kubernetes and Argo CD because we might delegate control over a field to a controller. For example, a pod autoscaler is changing the number of replicas on my deployment, and I want Argo CD to ignore that because I want to delegate that control to my pod autoscaler. I can do that with ignore differences. This is essentially the same thing, except it's going to be doing it as part of the source of truth and Git, the actual application manifests that are being updated. So hopefully that makes sense so far. Now we have products. Now the second CRD that I want to talk about is promotions. So this is a promotion flow, and this one, hopefully you can see it reasonably well. You're all sitting on a computer. If I was sitting on a stage, this would maybe be a little bit too small to read. But you can see that this one actually has a couple of steps associated with it, and it has a trigger environment. So the trigger environment is dev. So this means whatever is in dev is going to be looked at as kind of the inciting incident to be upgraded. So if I have pushed a new image into dev, maybe added some environmental variables to my YAML, whatever it is, as long as it fits into my promotion template, and you could upgrade everything, right? Of course, you could just give it a wildcard path and just include everything, and then it would keep everything, right, when you promoted it. This one, after that happens, it then pushes to QA as long as dev was successful. And you can see that it has a policy associated with it that specifies actions that need to be done beforehand, actions that need to be done afterwards, and then the action itself, which is going to be the method for promotion. And we'll talk about that in a second, but this is a spec we're going to come back to. Now, the third thing to understand is our environments. An environment currently is not available as a CRD. This is something you actually need to do in the Codefresh UI. But it essentially is going to work off the same principle. Now you can use this today, and the way that the environment works is it is a definition that includes any number of clusters, namespaces, and or application labels or tags. So what I can do is essentially is when I go back and define what production is, I can actually do that as a single block. So for example, I can say that production is anything that is part of a cluster that includes, US, that includes East or West, as in this case they all have. I could have prod labels on all these things. I could make it specific to namespaces. Sometimes people do staging and production namespaces on the same cluster, so you could do that. And they would all be part of the same environment. Okay, so let's jump into a demo. And I'm going to show you just kind of what this looks like in practice. So here you can see I've got a couple of environments: QA, staging, production. If I go to add an environment, I can specify production or non-production, and this is going to help define what policies are applied. And I can categorize it with tags, and then I can add my clusters and namespaces or application tags. And as I look at these, it's actually going to show me all the clusters that I have connected. But of course, I can use wildcards, for example, in my spec so that I could include future ones. So as I add clusters, they would be automatically added to this environment. Okay. Now, when I go to do a promotion, and we're going to do one manually, we'll look at doing one manually here. So I'm going to take interest, for example. You can see it's a few versions ahead in dev. And if I drag this into QA, it's going to create for me a diff on the fly of what will be promoted. Now, this is going to obey my promotion template. So if I have ignored some components as part of that, or included some components as part of that, then they would show up or not show up here. And then you can see that I have the option of doing a commit directly or opening a pull request. This is the action. This is the promotion action and how it works. And I can also specify what workflows I might need to run before or after. So that's an example of how that might work. Let's look at a product. Let's look at this Trio product really quick. And this is going to show me my release history. Let me zoom out slightly because I'm using a small screen here. This is going to show me a full history of all the promotions that have taken place. We can see that one is currently ongoing. So let's click into that one. And this is going to show me that I've currently got both staging and QA are running. We just finished a pre-promotion action here and here, and it's going through the promotion process, at which point now we can see that some of these post-action workflows are going. I didn't even plan this. This is luckily this was happening. I was just going to show that it was happening. So once all of these criteria are met, this promotion can then trigger the next one. Now, in this case, it looks like both of these, both staging and QA, need to pass in order to go to production. And so we'll linger here for a second. Now, what would happen if one of these tests failed? Or what would have happened if, let's say that I'm using Argo rollouts and I'm doing a canary release? What happens if that canary release fails? Well, it would automatically fail the promotion and pull it back, right? So let's see, just double checking how I'm doing on time. Looks like we're okay. So yeah, it looks like QA is passed, and now staging is completing any tests. Of course, I can drill down into the logs of these apps and see if there's anything to be looked at that needs attention. And you can also see that there's also a test that was skipped because there was some condition set on it. Okay, now staging and QA both passed. So now we're going to go into production, and we're going to kick off this pre-action flow, make our commit, and move into production. Okay, now this is following our template, right? So let's talk about how to create one of these really quick now that you've seen it in action, and see how it works. Because I think this is a great way to help explain it. Now, I mentioned before I create it, let's look at that product again really quick. And again, we'll see that actually, let's look on the products view. This makes it a little bit easier to see. You can see that this app actually has 3 instances in production, and they are all different clusters. So this one's in Asia, this one is just a KV prod, and this one's an EU cluster, right? So the cool thing about me as a developer is that when I push to production, I don't really have to care about what production means. My ops team is probably adding clusters and scaling things and whatever. And when I push to production, I can just be confident that everything is going to get pushed and promoted to wherever it needs to go for our end users to get it. And if there's any issues with any of those environments, of course, then they will be, rolled back. So, for example, this one just looks like it entered a suspended state. Why is that? Let's jump into it and see. And it's going to actually show me that it is, well, it's just completed now in the time that I clicked on it. It was actually doing a canary release. So that's why it was in a suspended state for just a second. And we can see that all these releases have been healthy. We can see that Asia is now going through the same thing, right? So they've all been updated essentially in sequence, and you can also change that to be more parallel and get them more close together. Though they were pretty close together in this case. So let's go create a promotion flow so you can see what that looks like. Let me expand out my sidebar here really quick. I could also use our quick navigation, but let's see. I'll just do it this way. I'm going to go to my settings here and go down to my promotion flows. So you can see I've got a whole bunch already defined. Let's create one. And I'm going to use the editor to do this, but it's going to create it as a CRD. So we're going to start with dev. Let's add that. And once we go to dev, let's go to both QA and staging. And from staging, let's go into production. Okay, so now I've outlined how my environment promotion is going to work here. Let's make some tweaks to how this works. Now, when I go to production, you can see it's actually changed it so that it is automatically going to be a pull request that gets opened and needs to be approved. That's great because I actually have a promotion policy that applies to production that it's always done through a pull request that needs to be approved manually. Now, you could, of course, not do it manually. You can change it however you want. I'm going to add in that a ServiceNow ticket also needs to be approved before this moves forward. and I'm going to add in let's add in some smoke tests that are going to run after this has gone up into production. Now, when I go to staging, I'm going to make this something that I do manually. So I'll be making changes in dev, and when I'm ready, I can drag and drop to trigger the promotion like I showed you earlier. And when that's completed, let's run a soak test. And I could have whatever tests, of course, that I want here. And now when I go to QA, I want this one to be automated and with a commit. So this is just every time dev is successful, it'll automatically go to QA, and it's going to run also some additional tests. We'll add those in. So now I've created this whole flow. I can actually go and view the CRD, the promotion flow CRD, that is going to show my whole flow and environment. And so I can tweak these as much as I want. I can I've got my depends on here, so I can add in that this in addition to passing staging, I also need to pass QA, for example, and have that be part of the flow. So now I've got to this kind of multi-dependency, DAG promotion flow. Now what it's doing behind the scenes, right? Going back to kind of our flow here, is it's updating in Git each environment in turn, running tests, applying policy, and then going through and continuing the promotion. Now these commits, one of the cool things about this is anytime I do something manual in the platform, it's going to be with my own Git token, my own identity. So it's not, it's not different in any way. So it follows my permission structure. So now that I've shown you this promotion flow, you should have a solid understanding of the three core components: products, promotions, and environments. And between these three components, you can actually model out your entire promotion flow for all of your applications. Now I'll show you, let's go back and look at a product here. So you should have a good understanding at this point of how all these components work. Let's look at the Trio product. Let's go to the products here. So here's my Trio product here. And let's look at the settings really quick. Now, I mentioned earlier we showed the product YAML. So we also have a UI for this as well. So if I look at my applications, I can actually add in additional wildcards. So let's say that, for example, I don't have this annotation. I can add additional annotations using a targeting wildcard. You can also see that in this case, I have 3 different promotion flows that apply depending on what's in the commit message or what's in the Git revision. So for example, I apply a Trio hotfix. This would mean that anytime I push a Git revision with hotfix, it's going to automatically apply this flow where it skips straight from dev to production. So that would be, a more potentially dangerous one. You can see I've got my version, my promotable properties here. And when I go to add, so for example, right now I'm updating image tags, but let's say that I wanted to include the repository. It actually gives me this really nice view where I can navigate the YAML to target these areas, and I can go in and target the repository, etc., that I want to bring in, and I can add this to my promotion flow. And of course, this is just going to be the CRD. So this is the product CRD. Here's the promotion flows that are applied. We looked at those a second ago, and we can see the promotion template that grabs the different components, and I can see that it's now added in this additional JSON path, right? Now this would update all repositories across these different individual image path areas that I have, because it's using this double wildcard stack. So yeah, so this shows you just how easy it is to create these flows and these promotions. And so you could definitely see that it would be very easy to create a single flow that applied to all your applications, but then you can also double click on it and make any additional changes. You can tweak it wherever you want. And so if you want to have lots of flows, you can, or if you just want to have a few flows, you also can. So this is a very quick overview of our promotions, products, and environments flow and how they all work. And I'd be happy to take any questions on this. If we take questions, I don't know if we take questions during ship, but you can find me again on Twitter at Today Was Awesome. I also would encourage you to check out our roadmap and the documentation on promotion. The roadmap is pretty cool. You can publicly see what's being worked on. So for example, there's some additional changes on promotion flows that are being worked on right now. This includes the support for gated approvals. Now that's already done. The CRDs for main entities, that's almost all done. Full audit coverage is almost all done. The promotion flow editor I just showed you. So those are all things you can use. And then you can see other components that we're considering, like release windows and blackout times. You can actually go on here and you can vote on how important these features are. So as you're looking at adopting this and the things that are going to be important to you, you can flag those, and you can also submit ideas, and we'll take those seriously and under consideration. So take some time, check it out, maybe make some suggestions. And then our documentation here is great. It's going to go in depth on how all of those CRDs work, how the flows work, all those things are operated. And then, of course, if you haven't already done so, if you're not familiar with Argo CD, I would encourage you to go and check out our learning platform, where we have certifications. Oh, well, that's my author dashboard. So I want to show you. Let's do this one. So this is going to be where we have all of our training and certification courses for GitOps with Argo. We have 3 levels. We just came out with the GitOps Enterprise level. So this will include things like how to structure your repositories, how to scale your applications, how to do application sets, how to do progressive delivery, canary releases, all of that kind of stuff. And it's available now. It has over 30 labs in it. So definitely would encourage you to go do all of those if you haven't already. Again, we have over 24,000 students. It is the most popular certification in the world. With that, John, do you have any kind of follow-up questions that we need to ask, or do you need me to mosey on? Oh, I can't hear you well. I heard you earlier. Yeah, I'm set up to hear you. All right, Tony asked, was environment promotions a hot topic at ArgoCon, KubeCon this year? Absolutely. It was probably the most popular topic for people considering. This promotion flow here that we've shown you is an excellent solution, but there are a lot of people that are trying to do this with like CI pipelines. I mean, it's just a problem that everybody's kind of recognized. Hey, just building a bunch of crazy pipelines to handle this isn't the right way to go. We need to have something kind of dedicated and built for this. And so that's why this was a pretty popular solution. For those that were there were some other presentations on different ways to model this, both at ArgoCon and a little bit at KubeCon. So this was definitely a hot topic. Yeah, and I still can't hear you, John. I don't know if it's me or you, but I just checked my audio. It looks like it's you. Okay, it is you. We're going to just try to read John's lips here.
It's me.
Oh, I hear you now.
Sorry.
You were just singing, "It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me."
No, I'm always the problem. Believe me, it's all good. That's awesome. Thank you. Great presentation, Dan. Lots of stuff to digest there. That's fantastic to see. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pose them into the comments pane. Obviously, we're going to use the hashtag shipped24. We do have a little bit of extra time here. So take your time on these questions here, Dan. So we have a question here from Siebert.
Yeah, Siebert says, are there any recommended prerequisites for the Codefresh GitOps courses? So the only thing that it assumes is that you have at least some basic Kubernetes knowledge. We've debated how much of a hard requirement that really is, because you don't have to set up Kubernetes, and it's the way the labs are set up. Kubernetes is bootstrapped for you. you'll install Argo CD. It tells you how to do it. So I don't think you need a ton of knowledge of that, honestly, beforehand. Some basic comfort with the command line is helpful because you're going to be doing some of that. Understanding how GitHub works a little bit and being able to like make a commit, make it a PR, make a fork. And again, it's going to kind of tell you what you need to do. And so if you get stuck, I'm sure you can just Google that problem. But that's the real prerequisite. Now, there are also a couple. So these are trainings and certifications that we offer. We also helped author some certifications from the CNCF. Those do not include any labs. So I always recommend to people, hey, if you want to do this certification, even just from the CNCF, go and do these labs first, and you'll be ready to pass the Argo certification exam, both from us as well as the CNCF. Ours is kind of a little bit more in depth, a little bit deeper. I worked on both of them, but definitely I would start with ours first. So that's a great question.
Zachary asks, does this work with self-hosted Codefresh instances? Any gotchas? Do you recommend deploying one Codefresh instance for all environments?
Yes, so this does work with self-hosted Codefresh instances, and depending on your question about should you have one Codefresh instance for all environments. So there's kind of two components. There's the control plane, right, which is connecting and managing all of your Argo CD instances, your Codefresh GitOps instances. So I think you really only generally need one control plane because it can handle quite a bit of volume. I'm sure there's some, enterprise customers out there that might need multiple, but very unusual to need more than one. But each cluster may have its own GitOps instance, which is basically Argo CD with our wrapper on it. And you can definitely manage multiple clusters with one of those instances. So it just depends on if you're trying to support more scale. The main reason that people don't run multiple Argo instances is because they don't have a control plane, and it's more difficult without that. Since you have a control plane, it's pretty painless to have multiple Argo instances, and it just helps helps you support more scale, have more isolation, less noisy neighbor effects, those kinds of things, and improves reliability. So I would say, even if you're using self-hosted Codefresh, control plane, this is going to work. And of course, it's going to work if you're using the hosted control plane with your individual Argo instance, GitOps instances on your own clusters. Those would all work. The gotchas. So Zachary was asking gotchas. The only gotcha I would say is that this is fairly new. So every once in a while we'll run into, little edge cases or things where people will point out bugs. We're pretty good about getting those fixed. We had one like 2 weeks ago around some of the Git commits causing a merge conflict, and we had that fix out within about 12 hours of somebody raising it. So we're able to be pretty aggressive on those. But that's the only thing, is that because it is new, we've been testing it for months. We've had some customers, some users testing it for months. And at this point, I think we're ready to go. We feel like it's a good, ready to use product.
Tony asked, was environment promotions a hot topic at ArgoCon/KubeCon this year?
Oh, yeah. We talked about that one earlier. But yeah, it was a super hot topic because everybody realizes that they need to solve this problem. Managing, a lot of people today are doing this by manually copying and pasting, values across folders, structures, and that's, error prone. Or they'll make a kind of bespoke CI pipeline that they have to manage, and it's kind of fragile. It's not a great solution. Here you've got a declarative standard. You're not doing imperative operations, and you're just describing what should be done and letting the controllers take care of it. So that's a better approach.